Okay. All right. Testing 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. All right. Let's give the choir a round of applause for two fine selection that complements the lesson. Yes. They are right on point with those two songs. So we'll have the reading of the law that pertaineth to the living. Without these laws, there is no entry into the kingdom. All right, you ready? These laws are pertaining to life. Go ahead.
And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's.
Okay, now let's go to Ecclesiastes chapter 12. And we're going to see what Solomon said about these laws and how we are supposed to keep them. So Ecclesiastes chapter 12, and we're going to pick it up at verse 13. We're going to read two verses, 13 and 14. When you get there, go ahead.
Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil.
Right, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Let's see now, if you don't keep those commandments, what your reward shall be. Let's go into the last book of the last chapter. This is Revelation 22, and we're going to pick it up at verse 14. Let's look at what your reward shall be if you choose to keep it or you choose not to keep it. Go ahead.
Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city. For without are dogs, and sorcerers, and whoremongers, and murderers, and idolaters, and whosoever loveth and maketh a lie.
And whosoever loveth and maketh a lie. All right, brothers and sisters, please put your phone on mute. Again, I want to say happy Sabbath to you.
Happy Sabbath.
And I want to say happy Sabbath to the people on the brothers and sisters on live stream, Facebook. And today we're going to deal with a lesson called I Wrote No New Commandment. I wrote no new commandments. So those two selection from the choir was just perfect on time. Because that is exactly what we're dealing with. So today we'll look at the commandment from the time of old to the time of new to see if there is any difference in the commandment. For we have told, or we have heard from church folks that the Lord knows we can't keep these commandments, and these commandments are too hard to keep. So we will examine it to see whether or not every generation throughout mankind had to play by the same rules. We want to see if the Lord put this same burden on all the generations throughout this Bible, and whether or not he is putting an unfair burden on us. So we're going to start out this lesson with 1 John 2 and 7. 1 John chapter 2 and verse 7. We're going to hit one verse, 2 and 7. Read.
Brethren, I write no new commandment unto you, but which an old commandment, which ye had from the beginning.
Which ye had from the beginning. We're going to look at the beginning. Read.
The old commandment is the word which ye have heard from the beginning.
Right. So this is the New Testament, and it is telling us that this is an old commandment. Is the Lord unreasonable to tell us that we should keep this commandment that no generation was able to keep? We will prove it, that people of old and of new age, whether they live by it or not, and that the Lord has not laid an unreasonable burden on us that we are unable to bear. Because in the opening, we read the commandments, right?
That's right.
And we know what it said and what it's all about. So let's go to same 1 John. We're just going to flip over to chapter 3, and we're going to pick it up at verse 12. Verse 12. Chapter 3 and 12. Go ahead and read.
Not as Cain, who was the wicked one, and slew his brother. And wherefore slew he him? Because his own works were evil, and his brother's righteous.
Right. So here, again, we are in the New Testament talking about something that happened in the day of old. We are reading about Cain and righteous mindset that fuel his unrighteous action. We are compelled to find out if the commandment was in existence at that time for the Lord to impute sin against him, because we know that love can conquer hate if we keep the commandment. That's what 1 John 5 and 3 tells you, right? Mm-hmm. So we are compelled to go look into the past and see what happened. Because you notice also, John used the same kind of pronouns that the Lord used when he first created man. He, him. That rings a bell? He, him? But we're going to go to Genesis 4. You can look at that on your own. It's Genesis 1 and 27. But we're going to go to Genesis 4 and 1. So we see that John used the same language that the Lord used when he first created man. So he used the same language to describe the first man that got murdered. So Genesis chapter 4, and we're going to pick it up at the 1. Genesis 4 and 1. We're going to look at what transpired during the time of Cain and Abel. The first two procreation. Go ahead.
And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground.
Right, so one was a farmer and the other one was a cattle rancher or cattle herder. Go ahead.
And in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel, he also brought of the firstling of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering.
Right, and we're going to see why the Lord have respect to Abel and his offering. There got to be a reason. Verse 5.
But unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect.
And we're going to see why he has no respect. Okay. Read.
And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell.
Right. So we're going to see also that Cain did not have a conversation with the Lord. The Lord just looking at Cain's countenance and looking at his behavior. You know, sometimes you can look at a person and see the evil in their eyes. Like they come into, not the Jesus out of you and leave the hallelujah. You know, you can tell. So, verse 6, go ahead.
And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth? And why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted?
Right. So the Lord said, if you do well, you will be accepted. Read.
And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door.
Right. So the Lord told him to do well. And if he refused to do well, then Satan, who didn't do well, is waiting for him at the door to rule over him. Read.
And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him.
Go ahead.
And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and slew him.
So Cain committed the first murder. Okay, so if it is not a commandment, it is not unlawful, then sin shouldn't be imputed against him, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. Ain't no big deal. This is the Wild Wild West, right? Go ahead.
And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother?
Right. He asked him a question. Where is Abel thy brother? And what he said?
And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper?
So he said, I know not. So he's lying right there. Read.
And he said, What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And
Right.
now,
The blood of your brother crying to the Lord from the ground. For what? For justice. Read.
and now art thou cursed from the earth, which have opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand.
Go ahead.
When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth.
Go ahead.
And Cain said unto the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear.
Right. So if there wasn't a commandment, then the Lord shouldn't have no reason to punish Cain. And the Lord would be unreasonable because he is punishing an innocent man. So that shows us that the commandment was there for him to follow and for him to keep. So we can see in the beginning, from the first procreation, that the commandment exists at that time. So let us find out what the Lord gave Abram for him to call him a friend of the Lord. Let's look at even Abraham, how the Lord dealt with Abraham. Let's go to Genesis 17 and pick it up at the 1. Genesis 17 and pick it up at the 1. See, we could even show you Adam, but at least, everyone knows the sin that Adam sinned, so that's why we're here. That's why I'm standing here. But we just want to show you the first procreation, that the fruit didn't fall far from the tree. So Genesis 17 and 1. Let's look at why the Lord called Abram a friend. Go ahead.
And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be thou perfect.
Right, so you are not too old for the Lord to call on you, or to even come into this word. Read.
And I will make my covenant between me and thee.
Right, so that covenant that he's talking about, covenant between me and thee, that is called a covenant of betwixt. That is the circumcision. That's the bloody handshake. Read.
And will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee.
Right, so that's the Royal 10. Right there, that is the Royal 10. My covenant is with thee. One was a blood covenant with a circumcision. The other one is a spiritual covenant that he's going to have to follow, and he's going to have to obey and agree. So we see that the Lord hasn't done anything new even with Abraham. Read.
And thou shalt be a father of many nations.
So Abraham, my covenant is with you. This was the same commandment Cain and Abel had to live by. And let's see how far we're going to get, and we'll see also if there's any changes. So once Abraham comes under the covenant of the umbrella, the Lord changed his name to Abraham. Abraham was obedient to the Lord. He had no need to impose the sacrificial law on him. So we're going to see also who he imposed the sacrificial law on and how well they keep the commandments. So now let's go to Exodus 19, and we're going to pick it up at the 1, because Israel came to the Mount Sinai, known as Horeb, or the land of Media, to know the Lord's standard and to know the Lord's standard. So do you think the Lord is telling Israel anything different from what he told Cain? Abel and Abraham had to keep the commandments. So now let's see if he's going to tell Moses and tell the children of Israel anything different. Verse 19, go ahead. 19 and 1, go ahead.
In the 3rd month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai. For they were departed from Rephidim, and were come to the desert of Sinai, and had pitched in the wilderness, and there Israel camped before the mount.
Read.
And Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel,
Right. So he's reminding Israel that they came out of Jacob, even though they are one of the same, Israel and Jacob. But he always put Jacob in front of us to remind us that we came out of Jacob's seed and we were adapted. Read.
Ye have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself.
Okay.
Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine.
Right. So he's putting in front of them the same covenant that they need to keep in order to be a friend of the Lord. Just like how he did with Abraham. Just like how Abel kept his commandment. So far we see there is no difference in the generation as far as what the Lord is asking them to do. Read.
And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests, and an holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel.
Right. So the only way you can be a peculiar people unto me, Israel, is by obeying my voice and keep the covenant, which is the same thing as the commandments, because that is your government. That's the only thing that's going to allow you to live in peace with your fellow man and teach you how to treat the Creator. Read.
And Moses came and called for the elders of the people, and laid before their faces all these words which the Lord commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord hath spoken, we will do.
So all of them agree that all that the Lord said, they will do. And that's one of the things, brothers and sisters, we take you through before you baptize. It's called the covenant scriptures. We'll go over the covenant scriptures with you and make sure you understand the covenant that you're getting in, and you understand that this is a lifetime. There is no walking away from it. There is no breaking it. This is a lifetime of investment. Finish that up.
And Moses returned the words of the people unto the Lord.
So, of course, later on, the people agree. They went to Mount Sinai, and the Lord gave them the 10 commandments. So you can put this note in your book, Exodus 20, 1 to 17. But since we have read the commandments, we ain't going to go through and read it again. All right? I'm going to spare you this time. But I just want you to make a note of that. So we're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 4 instead. And the Lord is going to reiterate what he said to Israel on Mount Sinai. You know, in case Israel had a memory relapse. So we're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 4. Chapter 4. And we're going to pick this up at verse 2, and then we're going to skip to verse 10. Okay. Read.
Ye shall not add unto the words which I command you, neither shall ye diminish aught from it, that ye may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you.
Right, so you ain't supposed to add or take anything from it. You're supposed to just deal with it straight. Drop down to verse 10. And go ahead.
Especially the day that thou stoodest before the Lord thy God in Horeb.
So the Lord is reminding you where he gave you these commandments that you agreed to keep. Read.
When the Lord said unto me, gather me the people together, and I will make them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days that they shall live upon the earth.
Whose word?
The Lord's words.
So the Lord's word. So it's not Moses' word, right? So we read the Lord's words, not Moses' words. Read.
And that they may teach their children.
So you got to share this with your children. It's supposed to be from generation to generation. So you grow up a holy seed unto the Lord. Read.
And ye came near and stood under the mount. And the mountain burned with fire unto the midst of heaven, with darkness, clouds, and thick darkness. And the Lord spake unto you out of the midst of the fire.
Right, so you didn't see no similitude of the Lord, so that you can make any kind of graven image and say, this is what the Lord looked like. He did that so you wouldn't be able to walk around with all these different charms that they claim that pertaining to the Lord. Read.
Ye heard the voice of the words, but saw no similitude, only ye heard a voice. And he declared unto you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform.
Which he commanded you to do what?
To perform.
So you got to do something, right? You got to do something. You can't just sit and just say, well, the Lord told me to keep the commandments, and there is no action behind it. What are these commandments is he pointing to? Go ahead.
Even 10 commandments.
Even the royal 10. Even the royal 10. That's what he's talking about. And what else did he do?
And he wrote them upon 2 tables of stone.
Right, so it's written in stone. It's unbreakable. So now, let's go back to Exodus 24, and we're going to pick it up at the 1, because what we're going to look at is that we're going to look at how Israel affirmed the covenant with the animal's blood. They affirmed the covenant. That means they heard it, they accept it.
That's right.
And it is the same thing throughout the generations. So let's go to Exodus 24. And we're going to pick it up at the 1. Exodus 24. So we are taking it from a different direction in terms of looking at the covenant through the generations. So, in order to affirm something, you got to agree on it, right? So, that's what Israel did. They agreed on it. Go ahead, read.
Verse 1.
Right.
And he said unto Moses, Come up unto the Lord, thou and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders, and worship ye afar off. And Moses alone shall come near the Lord, but they shall not come nigh, neither shall the people go up with him. And Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord, and all the judgments.
Some of the words of the Lord.
All the words of the Lord.
So Moses didn't drop a stitch, right?
That's right.
Okay. Go ahead.
And all the judgments.
And all the judgment. It comes with judgment too, because he's going to judge you based on what he's telling you to do. So how is it you're going to show up in a church and there is no rules to follow? If we supposed to drive without the rules, won't we have accidents? Isn't the rules are to prevent accidents from happening? Same thing with the commandment. It prevents us from killing each other. It prevents us from going a whoring on our God. So it is pertaining to the living and a guideline for the living. Read.
And all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which the Lord hath said will we do.
So we ask baptizee too if they agree with what the Lord said. If all the word that the Lord say, if they will do. And they all agree. So you got to buy into this. Not it buying into you. You got to buy into it. Verse 6, right?
Verse 4.
Okay, go ahead.
And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, and rose up early in the morning, and built an altar under the hill, and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel.
So according to the 12 tribe of Israel, not one tribe that they have over in the Middle East, so they're Jewish. 12 tribes. And they are called Israel. Read.
And he sent young men of the children of Israel, which offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto the Lord. And Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar.
So we see right here, Moses is sprinkling the blood on the altar to cleanse it. Read.
And he took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people, and they said, all that the Lord hath said will we do, and be obedient.
So they agree to the covenant. They agree to the commandment. So Moses read some book. So tomorrow you think they're going to read some book? And they're going to ask the people if they agree with the Lord? No. Read.
And Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people, and said, behold, the blood of the covenant, which the Lord hath made with you concerning all these words.
Right, concerning all these words. I want you to pay attention to what we just read, verse 7 and 8. You notice the Moses only report that he uses blood. So we're going to look at Paul's writing. Remember now, Paul was a Pharisee, so he was deep in the priesthood. So he's going to give us an account of what Moses did at that time. And we're going to see if it's any different. Remember, this is the New Testament. So how is it that the New Testament is telling you about Moses? So, let's go to Hebrews chapter 9. Hebrews chapter 9. So we're going to see what Paul say about the same event. Because people always go to Paul's writing. So, does Paul keep the commandments? Does Paul support the commandments? So Paul got to have some knowledge. Let's see what he said. We're going to pick it up at verse 18. Verse 18. Read.
Whereupon, neither the first testament was dedicated without blood.
The first testament was dedicated without blood. Even the first testament was dedicated with blood. Because they had to kill the animal without sin. I mean, with sin, blood has to be shed. So, every blood covenant pertaining to sin, they had to kill an animal. But it said, whereupon neither the First Testament was dedicated without blood. Let's see what else. Verse 19.
For when Moses had spoken every precept to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of calves and of goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the book and all the people.
Okay. So Moses dealt with precepts. Tomorrow, when they teach you in the churches, do they deal with a precept? No. So Moses dealt with precept. So we are looking at the precept of the commandment right now. And you notice what Paul said about what happened during the time of Moses? Yeah, he sprinkled blood, but what else did he sprinkle? He sprinkled water. But Moses didn't tell you that. But Paul, who was a Pharisee, told you that. He showed that to you. That's what happened during that time. Verse 20. Go ahead.
Saying, This is the blood of the testament which God hath enjoined unto you.
So God enjoined the agreement unto you by blood. So as you can see, that blood had to shed and also water. So we're going to see how that is tied to the Messiah. We're walking it down. We're going to see how it is tied to the Messiah. Go ahead.
Moreover, he sprinkled with blood both the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry. And almost all things are by the law purged with blood. And without shedding of blood is no remission.
Right. Without shedding of blood is no remission. Blood had to be shed for sin. You can read Leviticus chapter 4 and it show you all the sin offering that Moses them had to make. So the animal blood was shed for Israel's sin. Jesus had to confirm the covenant and shed his blood for the remission of all mankind's sin, because the blood of bulls and goats couldn't keep the Father's eye from looking at us as sinners, which only the blood of Jesus can justify. The Father is perfect and will not waste time with unclean people. So let's go look at Jesus, how he died, what came out of him. Let's go to John 19, because something else came out of Jesus. We want to see if it's the same blood and the same water. Because we're dealing with a blood covenant. We said John 19 and 28. John 19 and 28. John 19 and verse 28. Go ahead.
After this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now accomplished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, saith, I thirst.
Okay.
Now there was set a vessel full of vinegar, and they filled a sponge with vinegar, and put it upon hyssop, and put it to his mouth.
Read.
When Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, It is finished.
So all these things that Jesus do was spoken by the prophet, but that's another lesson for another time. Go ahead.
And he bowed his head and gave up the ghost.
Which the ghost he's talking about is the breath of life. It's not no soul that came out of Jesus while he was on the cross, as they teach you in these other churches. Read.
The Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation that the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath day was a high day.
Right, so that's where they got, Jesus died on Good Friday mixed up, because you have really two preparation day. You have preparation day on the Passover for the day of unleavened bread, and you have preparation day on Friday going into the regular Sabbath. So that's where they got all that stuff mixed up. But again, the lesson is not about that. Go ahead.
Besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they may be taken away.
Okay.
Then came the soldiers and brake the legs of the first and of the other which was crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was dead already, they brake not his legs.
Right. So let's see what they do to Jesus and what comes out of him. Go ahead.
But one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith came there out blood and water.
Right. So as you can see, the blood is a representation of Jesus' baptism. Once we baptize, we got to come underneath that blood, and we got to stay on that blood. And that blood is what justifies us. So the atonement is why the Passover had to be killed. The atonement is why the Passover had to be killed. Jesus had to be killed because he's a sin offering. Just like Moses killed the animals, sprinkled the blood. Not only that, the high priest does the same thing too during the time of Moses. And all these were a forerunner for Jesus, who's going to be the ultimate sacrifice to affirm and confirm the covenant, which is the commandments. So the baptism is symbolic of his death and resurrection for us to be partakers of his ministry. And we must come underneath his blood by baptism and keep his commandment. That's what the bond of the covenant represents. You are making a vow to the Lord that you gonna keep his covenant when you baptize. You are making a vow. So now let's go to Mark 16 and 16. So as you can see that it is consistent in keeping the covenant, keeping the commandments. So let's go to Mark 16 and 16 and see what Mark say. These are the words of Jesus. Let's see what he told his disciple. Because, brothers and sisters, if you are not keeping the commandments, or if you have been baptized and no one taught you that you should keep the covenant, you are making a vow, you are bonding your soul to the word of God, that you're going to walk in his laws and statutes, then you just got wet. Your baptism means nothing because you did not understood the contract. Just like when you're buying a house or you're buying a car, they go over the contract with you. So it is imperative that the churches that you attend, they go over the covenant with you, because the covenant is important to your salvation. Let's pick this up at verse 15. Mark 16 and 15. Read.
And he said unto them, Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature.
Some creature.
Every creature.
So the gospel is standardized throughout the servants of God, the church of the Lord. One God, one baptism. So the gospel is standard. Ain't not me serving my God and you serve your God, because we are coming under the same bond of the covenant, so we have to do the same things. Go ahead, finish that up.
He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. But he that believeth not shall be damned.
He that believe not shall be damned. For Jesus' blood carries the commandment with it, as just like the absence of the commandment means eternal death. So you are binding your soul to the covenant when you get baptized. So let's go to Psalms 78 and take another look at this. The Lord spoke through the mouth of David to give us a message. Psalms 78, and we're going to pick it up at verse 1. So you see, there is no getting around it, brothers and sisters. There is no getting around it. Psalm 78, and we're going to pick it up at verse 1. 78 and verse 1. Go ahead.
Give ear, O my people, to my law. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable.
Right. He's going to open his mouth in a parable to those non-believers. Go ahead.
I will utter dark sayings of old, which we have heard and known, and our fathers have told us.
Read.
We will not hide them from their children, showing to the generations to come the praises of the Lord and his strength and his wonderful works that he hath done. For he established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel.
Right. So what law that he appointed in Israel? The same commandments. The same commandments. Finish that.
Which he commanded our fathers, that they should make them known to their children.
Right. So if you're supposed to make it known to your children, aren't every generation supposed to keep it?
That's right.
So the Lord is not asking us to do something unreasonable, is he? Go ahead.
That the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who shall arise and declare them to their children, that they might set their hope in God, and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments.
But keep his commandments. To the doubtful, Jesus speak to them in parable, but to those with their spiritual eyes and ears on will understand the word of God. Let's go look at this again in Matthew 13 and 1. 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 When you get to it, go ahead and read.
The same day went Jesus out of the house and sat by the seaside. And great multitudes were gathered together unto him, so that he went into a ship and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. And he spake many things unto them in parables, saying, Behold, a sower went forth to sow.
Right, so we are not interested in the parable. That's another lesson for another time. What we are interested in is showing you how Jesus used the parable to communicate to the non-believers who will not obey him. Read.
That was the end of verse 3.
Okay, drop down to verse 33. And read 33.
Another parable spake he unto them. The kingdom of heaven is like unto leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal till the whole was leavened.
Go ahead.
After these things spake Jesus unto the multitude in parables, and without a parable spake he not unto them.
Right, so without a parable, he spoke not unto them. Because they lacked spiritual discernment. But the people who it intended for, they understood it. 35, go ahead.
34.
34, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, 35.
35.
35. That
All
it
right.
might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet, saying, I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things which have been kept secret from the foundation of the world.
Right, so that's the same thing David said. No different. So when you're dealing with non-believers, that's how you deal with them, because they're not trying to understand you. They are trying to push their agenda. So to the churches of the world, the written word on the pages of the Bible are parables and dark sayings. They understood it not. If they did, they would have known that the Lord said his word is good for the past, present, and future.